Welcome to Pop Up to Powerhouse, the podcast where side hustles turn pro. Here, we're pulling back the curtain on what it takes to build a standout, profitable brand in the event industry. From pricing with confidence to landing luxury clients, I'm sharing the wins, the setbacks, and everything in between, so you can turn your passion into a powerhouse business. All right, if you've hung out with me all the way up through my pivot series, we are finally in the last episode of how I went through that pivot, how I went through burnout. And in the previous episode 13, we talked about the routines that I went through, the personal development hacks, and some powerful ways of tackling your to-do list. And in today's episode, I'm actually going to walk you through how I had set a goal to pay off $100,000 worth of debt in 1 year, and how going into Q4, I still needed $90,000 in order to cover our costs and pay off our debt. Spoiler alert, we actually ended up hitting $120,000, which was absolutely insane to me because I remember voicing the goal of having $90,000 in Q4, thinking that that was a stretch goal. And I had thought that 60,000 was what was really probably doable. So it was actually mind-blowing that we hit $120,000. I'm also going to show you 2 unglamorous actions that I took to secure the biggest clients that we had had that year and exactly what changed in my business. It might not be a total shocker that the way that I was running my business was the same way that I was running my personal life, which was reactive. I wasn't consistent on social media. I wasn't marketing my business regularly. I wasn't sending emails. When I had something to say, I would say it. When I had something exciting to post, I would post it. I would send emails when an email would come in. I'd market when the business was slow. And then when we would get busy, I would stop marketing. Then business would slow down and I would panic and I would just continue to stay in that loop. I actually think this is a common loop for a lot of small business owners because we're wearing so many hats, right? So when we have time, we send those emails, we post more on social media, we do the things that where we're working on our business. And then when we get busy, that all falls to the wayside because you're so busy in the weeds doing all the things that need to get done for the revenue that's coming in. Much of what we do becomes reactive, and it's no different than, right? Like you show up to more marketing events when you have more time, and then you stop going to them when you don't have time anymore. This was a cycle that I knew I wanted to get out of. And since I had the time to create, I knew I needed to create some systems so that when we would inevitably get busy again, I would be able to stay more consistent. And so I took this time to sit down and start creating some automated emails in our business. I identified what my content pillars are. So at this time, right, I still have a custom branded gift box company and I have an event business. And so I was setting up the automated emails mostly with my gift box business. So a welcome series email that would kind of create a drip campaign as people would go out. And I hadn't done a lot of research on what this was, but you can create a lot of automated systems and emails so that you're staying a little bit more top of mind without actually having to physically press send on every single email. So I started to do that. I also started to identify what my content pillars are. So what am I wanting to post about? I think so much, as you've heard, was reactive, which a lot of us wait to post until we have something to say, especially in the event world, right? You wait till you have an event, then you post about it. And so I started to create content pillars to identify who am I talking to and what am I wanting to talk about and what is it that people need to know about my business, what makes me different. And so I identified what those content pillars were. I then started to create a social media plan, and I actually created a spreadsheet that we will link below that to keep myself organized. I am somebody who's very visual and I like to see all of the ideas. I like a place where I can brain dump because I don't know if you're like me, but as I'm driving down the street or if I'm on a walk, or it's almost like when I'm in motion, I tend to have more ideas. So I'll do a brain dump in my notes and then I would transfer that into this calendar. And the social media calendar was not only to make me more consistent, but to also make sure that I was hitting the pain points or the things that I felt like people needed to know about our business. And right now in a world, I think there's so many people that are, right, like quote unquote, becoming coaches or experts, and they're teaching people and other business owners like what to do. And I think that that's fine. Everyone's trying to position themselves as an expert. But I think that if you're not selling a digital course or if you're not trying to coach, you really need to figure out like who you're talking to and why they should be hiring you. So for me, ours was corporate clients. And I knew that there's three ways that people interact with content. It's either they want to be inspired, they want to be educated, so they want tips, or they want to be entertained. And so when I was making the social media calendar, my topics had to fall into one of those categories. And so you really just essentially kind of brain dump, start planning your content calendar. What is this trying to do? And what is your call to action? And this helps you, one, feel like instead of waking up for the day and being like, what should I post about today? You actually have a plan that is telling you what to post. You know who you're talking to. And it just makes it so much easier and you're not thinking and you're also not doing it on the fly. Like I was always doing it in the car or on the way to go do something. So I really started to block out the time to do that. So I will link that spreadsheet below if you're interested in getting that social media content calendar. Okay, so what I was doing is I was showing up more consistently in my business. One of the things that I started to do was I stopped waiting for inquiries to come to me. So a lot of my clients were corporate clients. And even if you don't work with corporate clients, a lot of people tend to have the same events every year and the same things are happening every year. And so you can reach out to them and find out like, hey, is that event going on again this year? We had so much fun working on that. Would love to work with you again. So I started to do that instead of waiting for them to contact me. I essentially stopped just sitting at my desk, twiddling my thumbs, waiting for somebody to email us to see if they wanted to work with us. And I started creating opportunities for myself. And when I was researching this episode, I realized this is something in psychology called behavioral activation. And the idea behind that is that essentially you're taking some meaningful action instead of waiting for your emotional state to change. So if you're like waiting to feel confident or if you're waiting to feel motivated, waiting for business to give you evidence that things are improving, it's not going to happen until you start taking some action. And I knew that there is no way that if you start taking action that something good is not going to come from that. You will get fruits from your labor. It might not happen in the time frame that you are wanting it to happen in, because I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned is I'm an incredibly impatient person, and we all want things to happen overnight, and it just doesn't happen that way. But if you can take small, consistent actions day after day after day, you will see fruits from that labor. You have to summon your motivation, which we talked about in episode 13. It is not about waiting to feel motivated. You are going to feel motivated when do you take action. And that's what I noticed was like every time I started to do something, whether it was to sending an email, it gave me that little oomph that I was needing. If you're struggling with any level of anxiety right now, most likely it is because you are in your head about what you're wanting or where you're wanting to go or whatever your worries are. But the moment you put yourself into action, you will start feeling that anxiety go away. Why? Because your focus is somewhere else. And if you're just sitting there dwelling in all the things that aren't going right, where's your focus on all of the things that aren't going right? So if you're struggling with any level of anxiety, sit down and do one thing today and then do one thing tomorrow and see how those habits start to stack day over day over day, and you will start to see some fruits from that labor. I promise you. Okay, so let me give you two examples of two tiny actions that I took that ended up turning into big deals for me. And I'm not saying this to be like, oh, look at these cool clients that I got to work with. More or less, it is how simple these actions were that turned into these big clients. I sometimes think that we either are overthinking how to contact somebody or vice versa, or waiting for them to contact us. But the point of this is how incredibly ordinary my actions were that resulted in getting these clients. So with my gift box company, I knew that I wanted to focus on working with corporate clients. And a lot of that was because I'm completely self funded. And we do have boxes that you can buy on our website. So, ready to ship gift boxes for birthdays, and you could build your own gift box, and we ship them out one by one. So, you do have that opportunity. But you're putting product on your website, and you're either having to run ads and getting people to want to buy the product that you already have. Whereas corporate clients, you get the client, you design a box for them, you order the product. So I only needed to order the product that was needed to fulfill their order. And remember, at this time, I was keeping my expenses as low as possible. So I knew that what I was doing was not buying for the website anymore, as much as I was focusing on buying for the corporate clients and getting more of that because it brought in revenue and it didn't waste product. And I didn't have to spend more than I actually needed. So I ended up figuring out who was the marketing person for the Seattle Kraken. And if you know me, so my son plays hockey. And so we're a big hockey family here. And I don't know that that's necessarily why I reached out to them, but I figured out who the marketing person was. I sent her an email and basically told her what we did. And the email was super simple. I have a corporate gifting lookbook that essentially walks you through what we offer, who we are as a business, how our custom boxes work. And I got an email back. And she basically told me, "Hey, we love what you're doing. I would love to meet with you and talk with you about this more." We set up a meeting. Talked to her about it in person. They ended up actually needing boxes and bought some custom branded boxes in that we shipped them all down to Palm Springs, which was super cool. So there was no fancy campaign. I didn't have a warm introduction. It was literally an email. Sometimes it's just figuring out who you need to contact and being brave enough or like having the courage to send them that email. So another time on my balloon business side, I had decided to become a little bit more intentional with being social on social media. What a shocker. And I feel like so many of us are either like consuming or not even, you just aren't even sure like if anybody's actually reading the comments in their messages. But I decided to become more social nonetheless. And an event producer that I follow had posted something, and I had messaged him very passively. I wasn't pitching myself. I wasn't like, "Hey, like, do you need some balloons? Or what events do you have coming up?" Or it had nothing to do with me. It was a incredibly passive comment on their post, and it turned into them saying, "Oh, hey, I actually think I have an event that's coming up and I want to talk with you about it. Can we meet?" And that was it. Like, I think we forget how simple some of these actions can be. Now, obviously, commenting on people's things is not always going to turn into a job. But I think if you can become social and you're not just constantly selling yourself, that you're genuinely interested in other people and what they're doing online. And what it does is it just helps you stay top of mind with them, helps you stay relevant. So basically, he said, "Hey, I think I have a job for you. Do you have a moment to meet?" Of course, I said yes. And the job ended up being a massive installation for the Fairmont Olympic Hotel in Seattle. And this install was a dream install for me. And I say a dream because when I started doing balloons, I didn't just want to have a balloon company. Like, I was not interested in your traditional balloon stuff like columns and arches. Some people might call me like a balloon snob. I actually call myself a balloon snob, and I fought that for a really long time. But it wasn't that I'm a snob about balloons. It's just that I prefer more organic artistic balloon installations, and that's what I really set out for myself to want to do. So when he reached out to me, that is exactly what this job was, and it was to do a huge balloon installation. Actually, we'll show it here. At the Fairmont Olympic, it was going to be up for a full month, and when I mean huge, this thing was probably 20, when you see the photo, it might have been about, I don't 20 feet tall on either side. Um, Stayed up for a month. It ran through for Mother's Day. And some people might be like, "How did a balloon installation stay up for a month?" We actually we do this quite often, but we'll come back in about 2 weeks in and do a refresh. So we came back in, we refreshed any balloons that didn't do well, but we use quality balloons. So a lot of times inside they'll last for a really long time. But you're always going to get a few. It's kind of like a flower, right? Like that will wilt. And then we go and fix them. But it was such a dream because it was this huge install inside the Fairmont Lubbock Hotel. They had a little easel up that explained who the artist was, and it felt like I remember dreaming about these types of installs, like, "This is what I wanna do." Um, but that action or that install literally came from the smallest action of me just commenting passively in somebody's story. And then the opportunity came as something huge. Okay, let me share with you one other example. And this was something I've shared it in a previous episode, but it will show you just another way of how I showed up passively to some degree and got business from it. And this also turned into a 5-figure installation. In the event world, venues will host these kind of mock events or an event tour, and they basically will invite people in who potentially want to have events at their venue. And then the venues will bring in their preferred vendors or partners to set the event up so that it looks fun and it's interactive. And then the people can kind of interact with vendors in the industry. And so I agreed to do an event. And I had talked about this also previously in an episode, but if I was going to do an event, it was going to be an install that I wanted to do to showcase the work that I wanted to be creating. So I did that. We had an installation that was up. I had a booth, but I had a table with our gift boxes. And one of the best things about doing these types of events to me really wasn't the people that were coming in. I wasn't ever really expecting to get something from that. I was there to network with the vendors that were there because vendors refer to other vendors. And I happened to be just networking with another vendor that was there who I love. And I actually remember complaining about, like, just where I was at and how this all felt so hard and why are like, it just feels like we're working so hard for so little. Like, it was literally kind of an insight of where I was. And you guys kind of know that if you've been listening to this. But so I was just sharing him and being kind of honest with it. And anyways, by kind of going through that with him, and I think a lot of us, have those moments. And luckily I was in a safe place that somebody didn't judge me and kind of kind of understood. Anyways, long story short, that resulted in me getting a huge install from the Seattle Symphony because I showed up to that install. That person does an event for them, their huge gala, and they were wanting a really cool balloon installation. And they were like, I know exactly who you need to contact. So that's the power of showing up. And I want to talk to you about the different types of marketing because I did a couple of different types in here. A lot of times we are waiting for people to contact us, right? That inbound marketing, like we're putting our content out there, we're posting it on social media, and then we sit here and we wait for people to get in touch with us. And I think a lot of times that feels like the safer route, the easier route, because you don't have to worry about somebody telling you no. And while that's fine, and that's also a really powerful and easy way of marketing, the things that I was actually doing were, while still somewhat passive, were outbound marketing. So I was going out and talking to people and emailing them and trying to get that business. And I think that if you're not doing that now, finding a balance between the two can actually really help your business. So if you've been scared to send that email, message that person, just do it. I think you would be really surprised at how much people are actually craving real human interaction, especially in this world of AI. I think so many of us think that we need to make like these massive actions and these massive moves. I mean, that's what you kind of hear online. And that's definitely what I was thinking. But really, that's where this book, Atomic Habits, comes in that I had mentioned in the previous episode. It wasn't about making massive changes. It was about introducing really small habits that made big impacts over time, right? It's sending the email, it's making that comment, it's going for a run, it's writing out that list that you need to get done, it's posting the content, it's following up with the client. Like you don't get to control whether or not you get the sale from the email, but you do control whether or not you send the email. I had been spending way too much time obsessing over outcomes that I couldn't control instead of taking the actions that could result in the things that I was wanting to come or attract to me. Okay, so then another thing that I started to do, so we just went over small actions that you can start doing and a marketing plan that you can implement in your business. Something, again, this is all about staying consistent and creating a plan daily for yourself. So, the other thing I started to do is I started collecting evidence because remember, at this time, my brain was focusing on everything I didn't have, all the things that weren't going well, and I knew that I needed to train it to move. And I also knew that there were a lot of really cool things that happened in my business. And I'm not going to take the credit on this necessarily. I did hear it on another podcast somewhere else. I remember thinking like, this is an amazing idea. And I cannot remember what that podcast was, but this is where you create on your phone, you open it up, open a notes, and you write out my badass list. The very first thing that you should write down was that you started a business because most people don't even start a business. And that in and of itself is badass because it takes so much fucking courage to do. And you learn so much about yourself. So that should be number one on your list. And then I started writing down all the things that I had either survived or accomplished while I had started my business. And mind you, at this point, I had been in now about like 7 years. So I had write down things that I had accomplished, things that I had figured out, things that I had done scared. So a few of the things that I had actually written down were I had been on early when we launched our business. I was on Evening Magazine, which is a local television show around here. I was featured in South Sound Magazine. I've been featured in 425 Magazine. I've done installs for some of the wealthiest people in the world. I have worked with some of the biggest companies in the world. It's actually just insane sometimes when you sit and think about all the amazing things that you did. So you create your badass list, and these badass lists could be something as simple as I had the courage to send an email to this person, like somebody I've always wanted to maybe work with or get connected with. Like they don't have to be, being featured in magazines or on TV or whatever. But those were actually goals that I did have for myself. And I had forgotten those because they had happened earlier on in my career. And so start collecting evidence as they happen, like amazing, cool wins that you had. Like the Seattle Kraken was a huge one, right? So start writing those down because you do forget them over time. And when you have a day where you're not feeling motivated or you're not feeling like you've really accomplished anything, you can review that and look back and be like, oh, that's right. I totally forgot about that. For me, one of them was going to the gym was evidence. Like that was a badass list. Like, okay, I I started going to the gym. I started being consistent, right? So sending the email was evidence or following the plan that I said that I wanted to do is badass and is creating evidence because again, the work doesn't have to be huge. It just needs to be actions that you're taking to move your life forward. At some point along the way, I had started to lose trust in myself and I needed receipts. And I remember hearing in the Mel Robbins podcast, this was a time when like a light bulb went off when she said this. I am somebody who gets super excited about ideas. Like I'm definitely somebody who is a visionary. I can see things. I love ideas. I love brainstorming and I love problem solving. So and it's a joke between my niece and I that I'm always like business idea 439 because I can think of a million ideas. But what I realized was I was constantly saying I wanted to do things and then I would not do them. And so in this Mel Robbins podcast, she had mentioned something that said, every time you tell yourself that you're going to do something and then you don't, you lose trust in yourself. And that was one of those moments where it was like, oh my gosh, like this is why in my business, I lost confidence in myself because I was saying I wanted to do things, whether it was like launch a new product line or get consistent in sending emails or setting up this marketing plan, whatever it might be. I was constantly saying these things that I wanted to do, but then I wouldn't do them. And so what I ended up deciding was I was going to stop doing that. I decided that if I was going to be more selective about what I voiced that I was going to actually do. And I spent some time actually thinking about it before saying it. And that was super helpful because what I was starting to hold myself accountable to was that if I said I was going to do something, you have to do it. And that doesn't mean that there aren't times where it's like I start to do something and then I realize like, I don't really want to. But I definitely became more selective, thought about it more thoroughly, and was like, yes, yes, I do, or no, I don't. And so if you're listening to this and you are telling yourself that you want to do something, and this can even be like, I want to work out more, but then you don't. Or I want to start eating right and you don't. Or I want to hang out with family more and you don't. Like those, every time you say you want to do something and you don't do it, your subconscious is starting to learn to not trust you.
Quick pause before we jump back in. If you haven't downloaded my free guide yet, you're seriously missing out. If you're ready to stop undercharging and book those premium clients that you dream about, I made something just for you. It's my free Charge Your Worth guide. Inside, I'll walk you through the exact mindset shifts you're going to need and real strategies to move from side hustle to powerhouse brand. Download it for free at thejamietaylor.com/free guide and take the first step in building the brand and creative business that you deserve.
So be very careful with that because you will slowly start to self-sabotage yourself. All right. So to end up this section, right, open up your notes, create a badass list, and start naming all the things that you have survived, all the things that you figured out, what you have done scared, but have done it anyways. When did you keep going when you didn't want to keep going? What have you built? What were some goals that you did have set for yourself? That was something that I realized when I started looking back at some of my journal notes or some of the other things that I've done was everything that I have said that I've wanted to do, I've actually gotten. So I need to start trusting that the goals that I'm setting for myself will actually happen and I need to stop worrying about them. So that was another realization that I had. I tend to be somebody who really like worries and gets anxious about like not hitting the goals. And then I look back and I'm like, you've actually hit all of them. So start trusting yourself. And what you're doing is that when you have those moments where you're feeling self-doubt, your brain can argue with affirmations and, like toxic positivity, but it cannot argue with receipts. When you see like, oh gosh, you're right, I did do that. I did make it through this. Like it reminds you that like you are strong enough and you are capable. Okay, so another thing I started to do, and this was both on the business and personal side, but I went to this 3-day retreat, which I talked about in the previous episode, and I didn't go too far in depth, but one of the things that we did in this was I wrote out my future story. So it was a story about myself 1 year from now. And what did I want my life to look like? And I actually think this was way more powerful than I expected it to be. And I've never really been like a huge manifestation person, but we're going to get into that a little bit later on how I do believe in manifestation. And I believe in the power of writing down the things that you want. And because a majority of what you have your conscious brain and your subconscious brain. And it's usually your subconscious brain that is self-sabotaging yourself, holding on to limiting beliefs, but your subconscious brain doesn't actually know the difference between what is true and what is not true. And so, if you can start conditioning your subconscious brain to believe the things that you want to have or who you are, then your subconscious brain will start believing it as if it's true. So that's where this future story came in. You start writing down 1 year ahead. What does your life look like? Where are you sitting? What does your surroundings look like? Are you sitting on your front porch having coffee in the morning? Or are you on a stage, like speaking in front of hundreds of people? What does your business look like? What does your family look like? You just start writing it out in first person. This is not like this. The point is to read it as if you already have it. So you're going to write it out in first person. It's going to be very clear. Okay, so I will read, if I can find it in here, my future story. Let me find it. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so this was my future story. I'm not gonna lie, I think I'm gonna feel a little bit like I kind of can't believe I'm reading it because I was not going to, but I think this could be helpful. So mine was dated January 8th, 2023. And so I was dating this. It was going to be January 8th, 2024. So it says, wow, can you believe where you're at now compared to a year ago? While times might have felt tough, you stayed strong, focused, and consistent, and it's paid off. You are so much stronger. You are doing things daily that bring you joy, and you no longer care what others think. You're finally doing what makes you happy. Your relationship with Scott, that's my husband, has never been stronger. I love that you guys are doing activity dates and keeping things fun. I've never seen you laugh so much. The weekend trips every 3 months has given you something to look forward to, and I can't wait to see where you go next. It's definitely been an adjustment not having Cannon around, but I can tell you're enjoying traveling to watch him play at Mount St. Charles. He's not only made the team, but he's one of the top forwards on the team. The financial aid you received was super helpful in paying for him to attend. Spoiler alert, we didn't get any financial aid. And he also didn't make that team. He made a different one. I'll go into that after this. And how about confetti? Look at how much it's grown in the past year. You're bringing in $40,000 a month. You've doubled your income to $4,000 a month, paid off $50,000 in debt, and have $50K in the bank account. Bringing Maddie on to help has been a godsend. She's really helped add structure, and she alone has brought in $200,000 on her own outreach efforts. Great job at keeping things lean. You're finally feeling financially free. You've paid off $10,000 in credit card debt and have $20,000 in savings. What I'm most proud of is your self-belief and confidence is back, baby. You have finally gotten out of your head and are finding clear on your desires. Your daily posts on your entrepreneurial journey and motivation have created a supportive community, which you've craved. You're helping others, but just as important, they've helped you. You're so inspiring. I love you so very much. There is nothing you can't do, Jamie Taylor. Okay, as cheesy as this sounds, it really did work because I read this every morning. And while not everything in here came to fruition, a majority of it did. Like, for example, it didn't come to fruition exactly as happened. So if you don't know me, if you don't know much about me, and I don't post a whole lot about this, but my son at the age of 14 moved to Minnesota to play hockey at an academy there. So at this time, he was trying out for teams to go play. He was wanting to play at a much higher level. And I have joked a lot that I felt like him and I were on a very similar journey because he, at the young age, was chasing after his goals. And I was also like kind of building my business. And so I was actually kind of like manifesting for him. But funny enough, he didn't play at this team, but he did make a team. Was one of the top forwards. And we ended up being able to pay for hockey, which is very expensive. So the point of this is that you need to kind of write about what your life holistically looks like. Family, kids, everything. With confetti, I did pay off my debt. My niece, actually, Maddie is my niece and one of my best friends, and she did not come work for me, but I did get great people to work for me. And so not everything came true on this, but a lot of it did. And I think there is so much power in writing down the things that you want because it's really kind of a magical thing that when you start voicing and writing down what you want, it's amazing what actually starts to happen. So that is the whole point in doing this. You might not get everything, but I do think that you're going to get something that you wrote down out of it. And then the goal is to read it every single day, every single morning. So write it however you want, but just make sure you write it in first person. So here is a prompt for you. It's 1 year from today. Your life is not perfect, but you're incredibly proud of the person you've become this year. What does that look like? Write down what you want to see. Is your business running on autopilot? Do you have a flood of clients coming in that you just can't even keep up with? Did you pay off your debt, whether that's business or professional. Describe in detail what you see and what you want your life to look like. And so this is actually something that I need to do now because I am, as funny as this is, like going through this pivot series, I feel like I'm still going through a pivot in my own life. And so that's actually going to be a topic in the next future episodes. But write down your accomplishments. Here is one thing I will say: you need to have some hard numbers, some things that you detail, right? You need to be specific about what it is that you're wanting to achieve. And like I said, don't get so hard on yourself whether or not it comes to fruition exactly as you have planned. But I think you'll start to see how the universe conspires and how God conspires to give you the things that you're asking for. But you have to ask, you have to verbalize and ask for them and write it down and read it every single day. Okay, moving on. So this next part actually kind of felt magical. And it really is. I actually have no other way to tell you like how to describe the feeling outside of it felt like magic. Right. And in the last episode, I talked to you about how I was going to tell you how I started to pay off $100,000 worth of debt. So let's talk about that. This part honestly feels like magic to me. And I know it sounds woo woo, but stay with me through this because I do know there were things that I did that helped to move this forward, but it did feel magical. So the first thing I did was I got incredibly honest with my finances. I combed through my business finances, and I do this on my personal. I've actually been very good at this. Every 3 months, I tend to comb through and make sure I'm not paying for any subscriptions that I don't need. How much are we spending on, gas, groceries, whatever. So I started to actually apply that to my business. And I started to look at, where is all my money going? Like, why? Because I remember going on a walk with my husband going, I never thought, like, I had dreamt of being in the position that I was in and making the amount of money my business was making. But why wasn't I feeling that way? Why was I feeling like I was working so hard and my business was making a ton of money, but I personally wasn't? And so that's when I really sat down and combed through my finances. This is where I got really lean, right? So the first step was that I got out of my warehouse and I really lowered my overhead. Got out of the warehouse. I had employees, but I only used them when I needed them. I wasn't paying them to sit around. I feel like those are the first two probably killers. Then I went through my finances with a fine tooth comb. Where was my money going? How much was I spending on certain types of activities? And is there a way to cut those back? I kept my business incredibly lean. So, right on the gift box side, I stopped just frivolously ordering product and I waited to order product when we actually needed it. I stopped spending money unless it was absolutely necessary. So, this was a very different version of me if you've listened to the past few episodes, because I was in the mindset initially, especially starting out, that you got to spend money to make money. And I was like, nope, we need to get a little bit smarter with how we spend our money. And that's what I did. The next thing I started to do is I started to actually set some financial goals for my business every quarter because I knew, right, I had so much debt to pay off. And I also had to make a certain amount of money in order to cover my costs, in order to pay me, in order to pay labor, and in order to buy product. So I had to make that plus more in order to pay off the debt. So what were those numbers? So that was another thing. And I actually thought it was really crazy that I've been in business so long and never had really set financial goals. And I was just laughing with my niece the other day talking about this episode about how like I've actually done pretty well for somebody who hasn't set a lot of financial goals. A lot of my goals tend to be like not financially motivated, which I think is really interesting. So I was like, maybe if I actually start setting financial goals, I'll start reaching the levels that I'm wanting to reach. Anyways, I digress. So, but this is the power of starting to set those. So that's what I started to do every quarter. I would physically write down for the quarter how much we needed to make in order to pay off a certain chunk, right? Because I was paying off chunks throughout the year. Then I would start writing down all of the business that we were getting. And I would write down, even if they hadn't actually paid us, but if we thought they were going to go through, because I was keeping a running tally of how much. So, and then if somebody didn't move forward, I would erase them and update. And this was just like on a dry erase board. I would erase that, but I kept that in front of me every day. And I looked at it every day, not in this like obsessive, staring at it 45, 7 times a day. This was different. It was really just tracking our progress and knowing that we had a target that we wanted to meet. And you know what it does is it changes the energy in your body because now you have a goal that you're trying to achieve and go after. And it is so amazing how your brain and your body will start to move in that direction when you actually write those down. So little by little, we started to chip away at our debt. Like I would start just throwing as much at it as possible. And at this time, I was really paying myself only what I really needed. And I knew that I could only do this for so much longer. And that is probably a conversation for another episode about paying yourself. Because if you don't pay yourself something, you're going to feel like it's worth nothing. And it's not worth all of the hassle you're going through. So that was kind of the next step I did after this. But my major goal was paying off the debt. So we got to Q4 of 2024, and I had made the decision like I need this gone by the end of this year. I wanted the weight of this debt gone. I just felt like I was going to feel a lot freer from not having it and that I would be making better decisions. All right. So going into Q4, I looked at our numbers and I don't remember the exact number, but I think that I might have still had about $60,000 in debt. And I knew that in order to pay that off, we really needed to make $90,000 in Q4. And that felt like a lot for me because we had not done that much in that time frame. And I actually remember having a conversation with the niece I mentioned previously that I'm going to set this stretch goal of $90,000, but I really felt like 60 was probably more ideal, more of what we'll actually do. But I knew that 90 was what we needed, $90,000. And that felt like a lot to me. I mean, guys, we're doing balloons here, okay? So, right, 90,000 felt like a stretch goal, but that was what I needed in order to pay off my debt. And I was determined to pay this debt off. I wanted it done. I wanted it gone. I knew it would feel so good if I could just get this, if I could just accomplish this goal. So I wrote down 90,000. And this is where I struggle to explain what happened. I think so many times people want like the tactical things that you did. And obviously, if you've been listening to this episode, I definitely put in some tactical things that helped me stay more consistent. But nothing was like so massive that it felt like it was going to completely change the revenue of my business, right? So that's why this felt like a manifestation, like total, it felt like magic. It really felt like fucking magic. We didn't do 90,000. We ended up doing 120,000 in Q4, which like we didn't just hit our goal, we blew past it. And that actually included even doing one travel install to Arizona. I remember at the end of that Q4, mind you, it was literally me and one other girl, and then we would bring in subcontractors during this time. We were exhausted, incredibly tired, but I was running on this adrenaline of determination and motivation to like, one, say yes to everything. I was saying yes to everything because I had a goal that I wanted to accomplish. We blew past our goal and I paid off our debt on December 30th. And here's what is so interesting and why I say it felt like magic because I wish that I could sit here and tell you, like, there was this one marketing campaign that I launched that did it, or there was this one product that, like, completely did it, or, I hired this incredible salesperson. There wasn't. I didn't. I really, for a while, felt like I really didn't. I'm not even sure what was different. But going over this episode, those tiny habits, those tiny things that I did to stay consistent, to continue to show up and to continue to be present, that I think is what attracted. And I think, again, it goes back to being magical and woo woo is I wrote down my goals. I put it out into the universe. I prayed to God every single night. And I think that is really what it was. All right. So now with researching this episode, I went down this rabbit hole because it was like, people have their feelings about manifestation. Like, is that what this is? Did I manifest $120,000? What actually happened and how and why? Like, I had a lot of those questions myself. And I think there's a few ways to look at this. There's goal setting research around having specific and challenging goals. There's research about monitoring and your progress towards a goal. And I think there is something incredibly powerful about what happens when you clearly decide what you're wanting to work towards. And, this makes me actually think of a quote, and I used to beat myself up over this, but Oprah Winfrey was asked by Trevor Noah once, what is the number one thing you see in successful people? And her answer was simple, but it was like, they know what they want. And I remember being like, like, I don't know what I want. Like, does that mean I'm not going to be successful? And I remember kind of like beating myself up over it because I didn't feel like I knew what I wanted. But I do think this showed I had set a goal and was focused and knew what I wanted there. So even if you don't have your whole life figured out and you don't maybe know where you're wanting to go, just start with focusing on this year. What's one goal that you want for this year? You don't need to have your entire life plan figured out. Some people maybe have that. Great. Maybe they have that calling. Great. But I think a lot of us don't. And I think that's okay. And I think that you'll figure it out. But I think that you do still need to set some annual goals for yourself. And I think that will help give you the direction and the clarity that you need. And it'll give you the confidence that you need to start actually hitting your goals. I mean, so before this, my financial goals were basically like make more money, right? Make more money than you did last year. But that's not really a goal. Like more money for what and how much and by when. You need to get very specific about your goals. And what are you going to do with that money? And that actually makes me think of, I just saw a post from uh, Kaylin Faulkner, I think is her name. She is an AI company that teaches you how to use AI within your company. But I think that's who it was that said it. And she had said, your money needs to know where it's going. This was advice she had gotten. You can't just want money to want it. Money wants to feel safe. So where is that money going and why? So it's funny watching that because it's like I think back and it was like my money had a place that it was going. It was going to pay off my debt. And think about that in anything you've ever done, whether it's been like wanting to buy a new house or wanting to buy a new car, you have figured out how to make that happen. And then you figured out how to make more money. And then the money has come because you had a place for it to go. Money needs to feel safe. Money needs a plan. So that was something I literally just watched this last weekend and thought, interesting. So what are you going to do with it? So for me, I didn't just want more money. I was giving the money a job. It had a place to go. And maybe that's why it felt different. Because every time I looked at that number, I knew what it represented. It represented more freedom. It represented relief. It represented not feeling caged. And I felt like closing this chapter of this pivot journey that I've been on since COVID. It was also proving to myself that I was strong enough and I was capable to clean this mess up that I felt like was either created for me. And I do think it was something that did happen for me. And hopefully, if you're going through something right now, if you can start to switch your brain to this is happening to me, change it from that to this is happening for me. What can you learn from this? Because you never really learn when you're winning, but you definitely learn when you're losing. So, what is it that you can get out of this and how can you use it to your benefit? There's always something to learn, and you will come out the other side if you choose not to quit. So, I'm not here to tell you Whether or not manifestation is real or not, I mean, I think that is a bigger conversation, and I do think it's real. You can call it manifestation, you can call it goal setting, but there is something incredibly magical about getting very clear on what you want, writing it down, voicing it, and looking at it consistently, and then starting to align your actions with it. Maybe the magic wasn't that I wrote down $90,000 and $120,000 magically appeared. Maybe the magic was that for the first time, I had gotten incredibly clear on what I wanted. For me, it was like I knew what mattered and I kept taking action until the evidence showed up. When I used to tell this story or I would think about this story, I would tell it kind of like, I found my way out. Like time had passed, I had healed, things had gotten better. But researching this episode made me realize that that's not actually what happened. I created structure when my life felt chaotic and I felt out of control. I decided what mattered before the day started. I shut off work. I trained my attention. I started creating boundaries. I wrote down my thoughts. I started to practice noticing what was good. I intentionally put positive affirmation into my brain. I ran, I lifted heavy. I reminded myself that I could do hard things. I made a marketing plan. I sent emails. I followed up. I posted. I took action. I didn't think my way out. I behaved my way out. And I'm not going to sit here and say that you can morning routine your way out of a mental crisis. I'm not saying that meditation fixes everything. I'm not saying that gratitude is going to pay off $100,000 worth of debt. And I'm definitely not going to say that waking up at 5 a.m. and drinking your green juice. And I'm definitely not saying that you need to wake up at 5 a.m. in order to be successful. What I am saying is that if you're waiting for your feelings to change before you take action, you're going to be waiting for a long time. So if you are someone who is like sitting here waiting for your feelings to change in order for you to take action, I think that you're going to be waiting for a long time because that's just not what happens. You have to start taking action in order for your feelings to change. You have to force yourself to do the things that you don't want to do to get the life that you want to have. I think that was the beautiful thing for me that happened out of all of this was one, this was, I mean, we're talking almost like a 3-4 year period that I went through this. So it wasn't overnight, but the beautiful thing that happened by going through this and coming out on the other side was that my confidence skyrocketed. Now, that's not to say that I don't have, imposter syndrome or like even doing this podcast. Sometimes it's like, what do I have that's useful to say or provide? But I realize like I'm not trying to be an expert. I'm not trying to be anybody that I'm not. I am trying to explain what I went through. And if you can endure the storm that you're going through and you can choose to stay and show up when it doesn't feel like anybody else is showing up for you, and you can make it through to the other side, you are going to become so much more confident and you're going to feel so much stronger. And I think about that often because had I gotten one of those jobs that I had applied to and quit on this mid-storm, I would not know what I was fully capable of. And I realize that now because when I paid off that $100,000 worth of debt, I immediately felt so confident and so strong that I know that if another adversity inevitably faces me, if anything comes at me again, I am so much stronger to handle it than I was before because I chose not to run. So please don't listen to this episode and create this 47-step morning routine. Because remember, like these were things that happened that I started to do slowly and started to habit stack them throughout this time period. But just pick one thing, make your badass list, turn work off, meditate for 10 minutes, go for a walk, lift some weights, send the email, follow up with the client, write down 3 tiny things that were good today. You don't need to reinvent your life this week. You might just need to give yourself one piece of evidence that you haven't given up on yourself. And maybe that evidence is just doing one hard thing today and reminding yourself, I can do hard things. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Pop Up to Powerhouse. If you love this, I would love it so much if you would subscribe to the podcast, write a review. It helps the algorithm gods push this out to other people and make us a little bit more discoverable. Share this if you found something that resonated with you, or share it with a friend. Also, if you're listening to this, just know that there is a visual side of this. So if you want to virtually meet me, come say hi on YouTube or Spotify. Next week, we're going to sit down with Desiree from West Coast Wellness, and we're going to talk about how prioritizing your health and strength can benefit your business and mental clarity. So stay tuned for that. It's such a great episode, and her story is amazing. So we'll see you next week.
Now, a quick ask. I want to keep bringing you these free educational podcasts so that you can build the event business that you want. You can make that possible by simply sharing this episode with your friend, following us on your favorite platform, and leaving us a review. It takes just a moment, and it makes sure that I can keep bringing you the best quality content so that you can go from pop-up to powerhouse.